Hello everybody, your ambassador of the African Diaspora Collective here, Ashriel Moore. And this time I want us to take a moment and watch this video, and then we'll speak about it in a moment.
We're sending a strong message today. Let me say free, 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 free.
So first of all, let me make it clear. I have no problem at all with people chanting whatever it is that they'd like to chant. That's cool. I mean, you can't prevent people from being able to share their opinions, whether the opinions are favorable to me or not, whether I agree with them or disagree. That's another story. But I think part of my issue starts where the information then is distorted and is half truth, or historical information is actually omitted. And so it doesn't provide a full picture, especially not to people who are just now coming into these spaces trying to understand a bit more. Because obviously over the last 2 years, more people who may not have been interested in what's taking place in this region, who may not have even been knowledgeable about the Arab-Israeli conflict, about the Palestinian issue, then they're looking for information that they could be able to then latch on to and help them to have a more educated view and understanding of what's actually taking place here. More academic than what it is to actually come and experience on the grounds, but at the least you have a fundamental understanding. But when you hear people say free Palestine and things like that, it gives an impression that you're speaking about, one, a state that was established beforehand, and now that state is no longer in existence because a foreign power came and actually obliterated that state, or at the least conquered that state. But that's not necessarily true, because prior to the establishment of the state of Israel in 1948, there were only conquering powers, at the least going back, we can go back further, but at the least going back for 2,000 years. So there was the British Mandate of Palestine. Prior to the British Mandate of Palestine, you had the Ottoman Empire. Prior to the Ottoman Empire, you had the Mamluks. Prior to the Mamluks, you had the Crusades. Prior to the Crusades, you had the Arabs. Prior to the Arabs, you had the Romans. And so in no period of time during this entire period was there a state or an establishment here that was actually called Palestine. The name specifically comes from Hadrian's. Hadrian was the one who had given the name to Israel. Emperor Hadrian had given this name to Judea. The name in 137 AD, after 2 years of fighting against the Bar Kokhba revolt. After the revolt was crushed, of course, the name of the region of this plot of land was changed from Judea to Palestina. And Jerusalem, which was the capital of Judea, was changed from Jerusalem to Aelia Capitolina. And so that is the source of these names. It doesn't come from thousands of years ago from the Philistines and all of that, which you've heard before, because the Philistines were actually a Grecian people who had migrated, who had come to Israel through the sea. So they had nothing to do at all with the Arab peoples who then also migrated to this area during the conquest of 635 AD and afterwards. So these two things are very much separated. But when you speak about Palestine, most people also get the impression that you're only speaking about the plot of land which is today considered the modern state of Israel. But the plot of land that is called the modern state of Israel today is only 17% of the land that was actually part of the British Mandate, which was supposed to be the land that was going to be partitioned from 1947 to Arabs, to have an Arab state and also a Jewish state here on this plot of land. It was 17% because the rest was Gaza, the West Bank, and then 78% was actually Transjordan, or what was called, or what's today known as Jordan. That 78% was actually given to the Hashemites, and they established what was called the Hashemite Kingdom. 78% of the land that was actually supposed to be part of the land that was going to be partitioned. That happened in 1920. The partition plan only happened in 1947. The British Mandate was only actually given officially after the San Remo agreement and the San Remo conference in 1920, and then in 1921-22, the British actually took up the mandate on the entire plot of land that was then called Palestine. From 1921-22, once the mandate was actually given over to the British, they changed it to the British Mandate of Palestine. Now, in 1947, when the lands were partitioned, it didn't include the 78% of the land that was already given over to the Hashemites. It only included 22% now of the land. You were expected to establish a British, Israeli state, a Jewish state, and a Arab state on this plot of 22% of the land. But when people say free Palestine, they say from the river to the sea. Now they're talking about the River Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea. But the River Jordan, on the east side of the River Jordan, is the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, which is 78% of this plot of land. But nobody is ever discussing that portion. Never. It never comes up. They don't even say the British Mandate of Palestine. They say historic Palestine. And so this is what they're actually referring to, this entire plot of land. But you've never heard anyone say anything about the 78% chunk that was given over to the Hashemites. And as a matter of fact, not only that, more than 70% of those residing in that land, in the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, are actually people who identify as Palestinians. I don't have a problem with people identifying however they would like. Everybody have the right for self-determination, for self-identification. Nobody else could be able to force you to identify with something or identify as something that you won't or you don't want to identify as. But at the same time, you can't take this and say that this is a historic identity that has been here all throughout. And the people who you're referring to as Palestinians, these are people who've been here for centuries. Because it's not true. There are people who have been here, who migrated in earlier times, but the majority, the big chunk of the people who actually would be considered today as Palestinians, or the Arabs that come from the nearby regions, and their documentation that shows that, they actually started to migrate here under the Ottomans, because the Ottomans were actually looking to fill in portions of the lands that they had conquered with Arab peoples or with Muslims. And so as a result of that, then there were a lot of people who were coming from Syria, a lot of people who were coming from Egypt, a lot of people who were coming from Lebanon, a lot of people who were coming from Jordan, and migrating because they were looking, one, for better financial, economic opportunities, and number two, they were looking to, obviously, to change their scenery. I mean, people have been moving around for centuries. This is nothing new, but that's okay. That's cool. Also, under the British mandate, during the British Mandate period of time, there were a lot of people who also migrated during that period of time. So these are not people who have just been here all throughout. There are a lot of people who migrated also, you know, from other places, not only from these places. There are people who came from Africa, from Nigeria, from Sudan. There are people also who came from European countries. There have been people who've migrated into these areas. So now to make it as if there is a one group of people who are the only natives to this portion of land, and then, you know, even me, they call us Israelites and others who reside here, we are part of a colonial project, they say. Now, how is that possible? Because prior to the establishment of the State of Israel, there have only been colonial projects that have been here. The British was a colonial project. The Ottomans was a colonial project. The Mamluks was a colonial project. The Crusades were colonial project. The Arabs were a colonial project. The Romans were so all of these have been colonial projects that have happened over time. But there were wars, and these wars then, I mean, usually in wars, whoever overcomes, whoever is the victor, usually they're the ones who receive the spoils. Now, I didn't create international norms, international laws. I don't like war. I'm not into, but I also understand that this is how things, unfortunately, in the world that we live in today are determined. You lose a war, you lose portions of land, and unfortunately, there's nothing you could really do about that. Although significant portions of lands that were actually taken were given back to, for example, the Sinai was given back to Egypt, and the West Bank was actually taken by the Hashemites after the 1948 war, the war that actually established the state of Israel, the War of Independence. But I mean, you break out in a war, and unfortunately, this is the result of that. So, I mean, we all have to bear whatever the results are for the actions that we've committed. But I think it's very important for us to stick to truth and stick to the historical facts that could actually be uncovered without a problem. And so I just wanted to touch on that for a moment, because I think it's very important that when looking at these types of videos to have a proper understanding of what's being discussed there, because at times the internet is so saturated with so much information. At times people don't even know how to download this information and how to upload it then so they can get a better understanding. So what they do is they just go to TikTok and to other places and get a 30-second soundbite of things, or a 1-minute understanding, and then that builds their worldview of or their basic understanding of the matter at hand. But I wanted to just share that information with you. And until then, everybody, you have a great day.